This Tuesday group is actually a collaboration with the American Association of University Women Ely chapter. And so I'm very pleased to welcome Autumn Cole, who will give the formal introduction to the program today. Thank you, Autumn.
You could make it here today, and I just have my little announcement before we get going that there's another really exciting, fabulous event coming next Monday, the 27th at Hidden Valley at 6 o'clock. And there's going to be 15 local girls and women who are going to share their stories about love of sports and what they're into. So I think that'll be great. They're all local women. In fact, we're even having the two Ely girls coaches, Paula Anderson and Jay Newsage, who've been coaches forever. They're going to speak, and it's open to the public. We hope you can all come. Women, men, girls, boys. There's refreshments that will be served, and hope you can come and hear that. Before I start, I wanted you to know that we do have bookmarks for everybody, and we also have little table toppers. And I'm fully aware that there are many aspects of Title IX other than what we're covering here today. But with 1 hour and the opportunity to have these two lovely ladies speak today, we're going to be focusing on sports. But it does show on your this bookmark all the other areas that Title IX has affected and influenced. So make sure that you take a look at that. Okay. So to welcome you all to this really historic week to help celebrate the 50th anniversary of the passing of Title IX in 1972. So thanks for coming for that. So how many in here enjoy sports? Oh, look at all those people. Of course, you live in Ely, we like sports. But, or have daughters or granddaughters that love sports. Well, thanks to Title IX, yes, this is possible. And Title IX, as you see on your bookmark, is really just a mere 37 words. And it says, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So it's a very complicated law, very inclusive law. We're going to talk about sports today, and a lot of people are aware of Title IX because of sports. This is the area that really did provide so many opportunities for girls, like millions, truly millions more than it did 50 years ago. So, and even for myself, I graduated from college the year Title IX was passed, and I had like zero opportunities for sports, like zippo. My brother played basketball, and I saw how much he enjoyed it, but nothing available for me. And then after college, I started skydiving, and I was in the first five-woman star in the state of Minnesota. It was kind of a sport unless you kind of landed in a cornfield and nowhere. That wasn't so fun hiking your way out of there. And then at age 30, a friend and I were planning to hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And I was truly worried that I would not make it back up. I could not afford a mule. So I started exercising, and I signed up for my first triathlon. I'm pretty sure I was last, but I got hooked on sports then. And now I cannot imagine not being active. I do triathlons, cycling year round, especially the new Hidden Valley trails. Those are great. I swim across minors a lot, canoeing, hiking, yoga, all the stuff that Ely has to offer. And now at age 71 3/4, it's been such a huge benefit to me, not just physically, but very much mentally as well. So enough about me. Today we're here to celebrate how Title IX has changed the lives of so many girls and women who are here today, Cindy and Deb, and we'll get to them in a minute. They were able to start sports in high school. But I did have an opportunity to interview one of our Elyites, Judy Clone, as many of you know, was very active in sports here. And she gave me permission to read a little bit about what I learned during this brief interview with her, because she was also very immersed in basketball. She grew up in the Chicago area, and in 1972, Title IX was passed when she was a freshman at Harold L. Richard High School. And in 1973, a few of her girlfriends decided, like, we want to play sports. And so they asked the boys track coach if they could join, which they did. And of course, they participated then in blue jean cutoffs and a t-shirt jersey. She loved being in track and running and throwing shot put, but she did tell me that back then girls were not allowed to throw a shot put. They were only allowed to throw a softball. And she also said that back then girls were not allowed to run the full court in basketball. You could only run half court, and you could only dribble the ball 3 times. So we've come a long way since then. And so her girls track team actually right around them qualified for state, and they ended up actually being honored 41 years later for this accomplishment. She and her coach and then her teammates, they were inducted to a Hall of Fame there at our high school. So she moved to Ely at age 24 to teach Phi Ed and went on to coach girls track, basketball, and softball. So when I interviewed her, she said she couldn't imagine a life without sports, for it becomes a part of your spiritual and inner being. Well said. So she felt like she was so blessed and honored to be able to work with all the talented Ely athletes. And some of you might remember that she really used the importance of sports for her when her husband, Larry, passed away at age 55, leaving behind his wife and 4 kids. And her family's bond, their love of sports was very healing during that time, she said. So, and then the last little part about Judy before we have our guests here is she really talked about the importance of teamwork. And so she used this wonderful analogy of seeing flying geese in a V formation and how they would change positions. And she talked about how the girls also did that on the team. And so she compared that all team members were equally as important, no matter what their position on the team, whether you're in the front, the back, or the middle, that everybody on the team was, energy was important. So anyway, victory for the V formation and also for the passing of Title IX. So first we have, as our wonderful guest today, and I really appreciate the time and effort they've taken to come here, is Deb Sunderman. She has a cabin near Ely, and Title IX was passed when she was in high school, so she played high school sports. After a hip injury while she was in college, she went on to be a wheelchair basketball player, a Paralympic, and a Phi Ed teacher. She's won gold and silver medals at the Paralympics, and then went on to become the first woman head coach of the USA Women's Paralympic Games, and she coached them to a silver medal. Woo-hoo. She's been honored with the MN Bancroft Award for Outstanding Leadership and Achievement, and this year, she's involved with the Minnesota Title IX Championship Tour. Kind of exciting, features a very cool custom decorated bus, and 11 women it features, Deb included, who've been selected for their notable achievements in athletics. So thanks so much for coming and sharing your story.
Thank you. Like Autumn said, I am a summer resident here in Ely, cabin out of Mud Pine. So thanks for inviting me. Just a little addition to this Title IX. I've been searching, and in 2021, President Biden did an executive order to add sexual orientation and gender identity to the Title IX. So that's just a little caveat there. Before Title IX was enacted, they had the women's sports were, can you hear me good enough back there? The women's sports were governed by the NAGWS, and that guide had information all the way up until like 1974, and the guide was the official rule book of how to hold a proper cookie and bake sale. So that kind of just tells it all, that we had to fight for our rights. We had to fight for getting officials and all of that information. So we've come a long way, baby, since that part of cookie and bake sales. I started playing basketball in high school. We had practice in 72. We had practice maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And of course, we only could practice when the boys had their either away game or their games. And then we had to be out of the gym for the main event. So practice 3 or 4 games or 3 to 4 weeks. And then we would go to a local town close by and play. Our tournament or our season was about 3 or 4 weeks. Then we would get to a site and we would have something called the game day, where we would all compete against each other. We'd play 4 games that day, Saturday, and then we would be the champions. But our coach would call a timeout during those game days, and we'd come there and go, okay, coach, what are you going to tell us? So we'd turn around in like a conga line, and we'd have to pad our numbers because our uniforms were our dad's white t-shirts and electrical tape in 72. So we had to pat each other on the back like this and turn around and pat each other on the back like that. So our electrical tape could stay on our shirt to continue playing. No strategy involved. Well, I guess there was strategy. So the officials knew who to call the foul on or give credit for the points. So after that, we said, you know what? I grew up in Leesore, so we would get the Mankato station. So from the Mankato station, we would see the Iowa State girls basketball tournament. So I would watch that from the beginning to the end, and they'd have the parade of champions where all the women, all the girls from the state would parade in. And well, I'm like, you know what? We don't have anything like that. So my best friend, Brenda Savage, and I called Dorothy McIntyre. I don't know if you know who Dorothy McIntyre is, but she was the head of the Minnesota State High School League. So we called her, said, Miss McIntyre, this is Deb Sunderman and Brenda Savage. We were sophomores then. We said, when is there going to be a girls' state basketball tournament? And she said, well, in 75, we are going to have a fall and a winter competition, and then in 76 will be the first official. And we said, 75? The winter? She said, yep. That was our senior year. We said, we'll see you there. And she said, we're not selling tickets. And we said, I don't think we'll need one because we're going to be playing in that championship game. And she goes, okay, girls, we'll see you then. So then at the tournament, we went through their districts and we went through our sections, and sure enough, we made it to the winter girls state basketball tournament. It was played at Bloomington Kennedy High School, and our little town of Leesore had 17 fan buses leaving town, and on the KRBI radio, they said, last one in town, turn off the lights, because the whole town was backing us. And they had to stop the game about 3 or 4 times because it was in Bloomington Kennedy High School, so they had ropes around, and the people just kept getting closer and closer and closer to the court. Well, we didn't win, but it was a monumental event for us. We lost 39-37. One of the officials just broke up with our center's sister. So we kind of blame her. You know, Vicki Davis, we tease her all the time. She's a very good official. So we tease her all the time about that. So there was the challenge. The next challenge was, we were pretty good. So we had the University of Minnesota look at Brenda Savage. She was a guard. I was a forward. And the U said, we'll take Brenda, but not you. So I thought, okay, there's a little spur in my side. I'm going to just keep working and working. I'll show them. So I went to Mankato. I played my freshman year. I was one of the first people to get a scholarship, $500. It goes a long ways now, doesn't it? So I played there, and then one day in my sophomore year, I had some hip surgery when I was younger. So one day my hip chips, I just came loose from the top. So I had kind of a hitch in there. I went to the trainer and said, my friend's knee is kind of locking up on her. She goes, what's going on with your hip, Deb? And I said, I don't know. So I went to the doctor. They said, take up piano playing. Your days of basketball are over. So from there, I went for 10 years, not knowing that I could play wheelchair basketball. I was working at a health club part-time, and I was taking a person through and asking them some health questions. And I said, any injuries that we need to know? And he said, he goes, yeah, I've got this hip thing. I said, well, what can you do? This is what I can do. And he said, I can play wheelchair basketball. Just, I'm sure you were shocked that you saw me walking up here. And he said, do you ever play basketball? I go, I played in high school and college. He goes, if you can walk, but you can't run or jump, you're still eligible to play wheelchair basketball. Have you played? He goes, can I have your number? And I go, my number? He goes, yeah, my brother coaches the Courage Center women's wheelchair basketball team in Wilma Valley. So I gave it to him, and he said, you want to come with us? We're going to nationals tomorrow. I said, I don't even know who you are. So anyhow, they went and they came back, and that summer he said, well, just come in and see what it's like. So I came in, and I knew the game of basketball. I just didn't know how to play it in a wheelchair, because you have to think 2 steps ahead, because you don't have lateral movement. And I didn't have lateral movement with my hips anyhow. So I went up there and I practiced with 2 of the women that were on the Gold Cup team that summer. And I just had to gain strength in my arms to be shooting from the wheelchair. And the local coach came in, and he threw this older jersey at me. And I said, what is this? And he goes, someday you're going to be wearing that. I opened it up, and it was a USA jersey. So he kind of challenged me there too, just like the U coach didn't want to take me to the University of Minnesota. Anyhow, practiced there, went to the first tournament that we played in Illinois, and don't want to brag, but I was the high score. I must have scored my 28 points, 13, 14 rebounds, something like that. And the coach comes over and goes, not bad for a gringo. And I said to my teammates, I said, who is this guy? And they go, that's the Olympic coach of '88. And I thought, okay, I'm going to show that SOB. I'm going to make his team, and I'm going to be a starter on his team. Well, sure enough, I did. We went to the '88 Paralympics. It was in Seoul, Korea. And part of sport is enjoying it with your family. So I was very blessed. My parents, it was a good farming fall, I think. So they got all the crops in, and they found someone to milk the cows. So they went to Seoul, Korea too, to watch me play. So part of sport is enjoying it with your family, enjoy those special moments. Then I went on and I played in 90, 92. And then in 94, I thought, you know what, I'm getting a little older. I better bow out before these young pups beat me out. So in 94, one of the gentlemen took a chance and took me on as assistant coach. I was coaching my local team and playing on it also. So I got that experience. And then 96, I was the first woman to coach the women's USA basketball tournament. That was 96. So as they were giving me all the information about the Paralympics, I read, the guys have to wear a shirt and pants, and the women have to wear a dress that they're coaching. So I had to go through the special NWBA rules and the FIBA rules to get a special alteration, so I could just wear a pants suit instead of a dress. I said, I can't coach in a dress. I'm not. Some of you know me. I'm not a dress person. Anyhow, so I had to get a special waiver to wear a pantsuit versus a dress. So I've had lots of great experiences seeing different countries, but playing and meeting all different people. The first Paralympic team in '88, when we went, it was funded just by us. We didn't have a cookie bake sale, but I did have a spaghetti feed and raffles and everything else. So that was very important to me also, because the friends were really helping out. But as a physical education teacher, my students saw me as an athlete in a wheelchair. So when they were there through all these years, every time they saw a person in a wheelchair, they would say, "What sport do you play?" Because that's just the way it is. So they gained some knowledge that way. Also, I had a bunch of kids after school at the daycare, and they helped me train. Now, think about this. I had probably 1,500 shots in an hour with these kids. One would be the statistician, keep track of my 7 spots that I was shooting. So they know the percentage. Oh, you got to work a little bit more on this right hand baseline shot. They would pass me the ball as soon as I trained. As soon as I released the ball, I had another one coming. Sometimes the ball would come down closer to my wheelchair and they go, "Hey, your teammates aren't always going to throw you a correct pass, so you got to get used to it." So it was great. It was great. Just a little history about wheelchair basketball. There's different classifications of levels of disability. A person who is maybe paralyzed from chest down is a class 1. A person who's, this is not international, paralyzed from belly button down is a class 2, and a person with an amputee or a hip issue or some other lower limb disability is a 3. So when my teammates would throw me the ball, they knew that I had the range that I could grab it from here. If I'm throwing a ball to a class 1, I knew that I had to throw it right here, because if they caught it over here, they didn't have abdominal muscles to pull themselves back up. So it was very interesting to meet all the different people from all over the different country. In '92, USA Basketball and the Paralympic Committee took over the Paralympics, so we did get funding, so we didn't have to go out and pay for the plane flights, the uniforms, and everything else. So it was this sport is very, very important to me. It is very important to my kids that I taught. And more importantly, I've seen changes from uniforms with the numbers peeling off to now people being fully funded. We still have a long way to go. Title IX is not in compliance all the way through. So my hope is that we don't have to talk about it anymore, because it's just going to be a natural thing that it compels people to do the right thing. Like Autumn said, the state of Minnesota chose 11 women to be on the honor roll out of different sports, and I was honored to be on one of them. The Star Tribune put this out. It was Jessie Diggins is on here, Lindsay Whalen, Ann Bancroft, Lisa Lismore, Natalie Darwitz, and we had a bus tour. So they went around to different locations to educate girls and women about Title IX. It's quite interesting because Star Tribune put that on there, and there's a little story when we were in the state tournament. Patrick Ricey was the sports writer, and he came and he interviewed us and talked to Brenda Savage, our guard, and said, "I just have one question. Does your sports bra inhibit your jump shot?" Well, if you knew Brenda, she looked at him and said, "No, does your jock strap inhibit yours?" So I think it's just some education. Title IX is a wonderful thing, but we have to keep working on it. And I know we have a long way to go, but we have to celebrate how far we've come. Thank you.
Spectacular, just all this information. So good to hear about the history. So, and now of course we have another accomplished athlete, Cynthia Haugejorde, and she's originally from my hometown in New London, Minnesota. So I'd really like to take credit for starting her out on her sports career when I talked her into competing with me in a canoe jousting contest during our annual festival there. She was probably like 10 or 12. I was 20, and I think we came in second. Anyway, so, and she was a high school freshman when Title IX was passed. She came from a very sportsy family. She's got one of her sisters here who is also a sportsy person, and she earned 12 letters by graduation. She went on to play basketball in college, set many, many records, and was the all-time leading scorer there at the University of Iowa with 2,059 points. She went on to be a starter on the U.S. Junior Pan American gold medal team and played with the Olympics trials team. And then she went on to play professional basketball in Italy. So we're thrilled she was able to make the trek from her home in the Twin Cities yesterday. And thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me here, and quite a story. I did play in a wheelchair once. I was practicing in Iowa, and there was a team there that was short a member. And my hands were so raw by the end of that hour play. I have full respect for you for playing. So quite incredible accomplishment. Well, thank you for inviting me here today. I am a child of Title IX, hands down. So anyways, equality has always been important to me. You know, when you play basketball or you play a sport, you win or you lose. You make a shot or you miss a shot. And that's why I like playing basketball, because everywhere in my life, there was not necessarily equality. Boys that would play, and there were girls on the sideline. And I was really proud of my brother Mark. He did a great job, and we were always excited about it. But I always be pulling on my dad's shirt. What about us? What about the girls? So Dad was actually there when he signed up with Dorothy McIntyre to approve that unanimous vote that girls can play, because there are 5 girls in our family. Wow. And every single one of us played a sport or did something with it. So it's kind of exciting to see that legacy. Now, I've been watching the news on the Star Tribune, and they pick the top 50 people or the top 50 this, but that's not what Title IX really is. Title IX is about opportunity to step forward. Opportunity to step forward in the portal, or what I call it, you keep walking. When opportunities show up for you, you walk through that portal. And for all those kids that played, they had to take that initial step, because it wasn't necessarily a popular thing to play a sport, because again, it's a boys' sport. The boys do that. Why do you have to do that? We heard a lot of that growing up all the way through. So my brother played basketball, and I love to play basketball. And I played from 7th to 9th grade every day on the sidelines while his team practiced. So everybody said, well, how did you, when they started in 10th grade, I didn't just start in 10th grade. I've been playing my whole life. It's that they recognized that you can play in 10th grade. So we played 42 high school games in New London Spicer. And we did make it to the regionals against Marshall University, and we lost 37 to 36. Not that I remember the score. But that game always stands out to me, because there were 7 seconds left on the clock. And they were shooting a free throw, and I told myself, I don't know why I started visualization, but I always have done it. And I sat there and I said, the ball's going to come off to me on the left side. I'm going to have to dribble all the way down the court with my left hand, and then I'm going to shoot the basketball. Well, you're not going to believe it. The ball comes off on the left. I'm dribbling all the way down my left side, and I'm kind of surprised, first of all, that visualization worked. And then there's somebody wide open underneath the basket. So I passed the ball, and they missed the winning shot. You know, just lots of stories on that one. I'll never put anybody in that position again. Even if they're open, I've decided that that's too much for some people. And that kid, every time I see her, she's an adult now, oh, I missed that shot. You know, and instead of, no, we made it to that game. And that's where the legacy of New London Spicer came from. Because when they see someone from your local community do something right, they think, I can do that. And that happened all the way through when you start thinking about it. So Autumn signed us up. Ann and I were in the flag water show. And it was at that same time we did the canoe jousting. And we had flags we had to hold up. And the mill pond is this little ski run where you always have to turn right. So I'm really good at slaloming on my right side because I always would ski with these two. So we did that, but now New London Spicer has won how many national titles?
Many.
So you start thinking about when local people take that leadership role, like Autumn did, and like Deb did, the kids see that. People see that from the town and they say, you did that, so I can do that. So I was lucky. I got a scholarship at the University of Iowa because of the barbecue. My uncle, Jerry, lived next door to the gymnastics coach, and the basketball coach was over there. And they started talking about it. And the University of Minnesota at that time said everybody plays 20 minutes. And I was like, I'll have no friends because I like to win and I like to play for reasons. So I ended up going to the University of Iowa. I played there 4 years. They gave me an in-state scholarship and we had 6 kids. So I was the third. And so about, 2-3 months in, I was kind of out of money. So I called a woman called Dr. Christine Grant. She's very famous for Title IX. And I was very fortunate. I picked up the phone and I called her and I said, Dr. Grant, Cindy, I have a question for you. If I am a university student and you're giving in-state tuition to all the other players, but I have to pay out-of-state tuition, I think that's unfair. I think tuition is tuition, and I think the University of Iowa should pay my tuition. And she said, Cindy, I'll call you back tomorrow. She called me back the next day. We had in-state tuition, out-of-state tuition. So all those athletes, all those women that were playing in those sports got tuition paid for. So I thought that was pretty powerful lesson for me, that you ask questions, you present it, you ask them to make a difference, and they step forward. Now, Dr. Grant was very famous. She just passed away, but she's very famous for the Title IX work that she did. She had stories. The University of Iowa was building a field house, and they said, hey, Dr. Grant, come on over. You know, she was the athletic director for women's. They said, you get to pay for 50% of this. And she said, great. Where are the women's locker rooms? Oh, you don't need them, but you get to pay for them, because her whole premise was that we have a student body that pays for the university athletics. It's not women just pay for the boys to play, but the boys just play for the women to play, but it's for everyone. And so equality comes into play there, very important. So lots of lessons learned throughout that entire thing. But Dr. Grant, again, if you ever look her up on Wikipedia, she's got there's actually a movie being written about her, and they're shooting it right now, so look forward to seeing that. Then the Women's Basketball League started up, and it was the 3rd year, and I got drafted 1st round, 6th pick, and went out to play for San Francisco. And I ended up being on the All-Star, All-Pro team. It was voted by the players. We played down in Albuquerque. So my teammates were Nancy Lieberman, Carol Blazejowski, all of those players. Very exciting time for me. I also played in the Junior Pan Ams with Pat Head's first team. She was 24 years old. So that was quite a while ago. And then I played in the Orient. We were the 2nd team to go into China in 1977. And we were there in Seoul, Korea, where they were trying to wine and dine us before they actually won the Olympic berth to have it there. So quite a few travels, and then I played in Athletes in Action during the summer in Italy. So I did a lot of traveling in my college years, and played the 1 year in the WL, and then I wanted to play more, so I went over to Italy and played there for 2 years. I played up in Brescia, which is between Milan and Venice, and then down in Avellino, which is just north of Naples. And then I was done traveling, and I decided to be an assistant coach at the University of Minnesota for 2 years. And my job code was administrative assistant, so they could pay me $8,000. Did that for a couple of years. And then I went out to Penn State and actually coached there for a few years. And it was the same thing. My job code was not assistant coach. It was administrative assistant, because if I was a job code of assistant basketball player, they'd have to pay me more. So all along, everybody looked for loopholes to not take care of what was right. So it's so good to see everything come full circle. These women coaches are making $500,000 a year. Their assistants are making a couple of hundred. Yes, I played for $8,000 or worked for that. And then over in Italy, of course, they're making $1 million contracts too. And back then it was 13,000, but it was tax-free. So, and they paid for everything. So it was really a fun place. So in my career, I absolutely played for every opportunity I could, which was from the United States teams, university, to what have you. And all along, what happens is everybody sees you and watches you and they say, I can do that. And that's why I think all these women have elevated their games, the opportunities, what have you. Now, for the last 30 years, I've been in business. I've been in software. So I have traveled around. I've been vice presidents of different companies. And I can tell you that glass ceiling, it's getting thinner. It's not as hard as it was once before. But at the same time, when you talk to people and you say, did you play a sport in high school? Oh, yeah, I played for Iowa State. What position did you play? All of a sudden, you know you've got someone that really understands win, loss, how to coach, how to play. And that just elevates everyone's opportunity, I think, to contribute. But winning and losing are both equally important. It's important to lose. It's important to win, because that way you understand the values of what it takes to get over across that line, or to analyze and become a critical thinker of yourself outside of yourself to say, what could we have done differently? What could we have done that would have made it a little bit better? So I do appreciate all of that. The other key thing is mentorship that's occurred. You see that in business all the time. So in my company, OpenText, I lead a Women in Technology. And OpenText is about 12,000 employees worldwide. And we service companies like Cargill, 3M, CHS, all those different groups. But we ran what I called a conversations of the collective, where we chose our customers to participate with us and some of the leaders of our customers, where we came across and simply said, you are our customers. We come to work every day to support you. Now, what can we do better? And it was right about at the end of COVID. And it was amazing how many women just wanted to tell their story of how they got there, what their challenges are. And because they're all alone, they're not going to the offices anymore. That's a whole support mechanism came into play. But I almost think like this is a conversation of the collective, learning from each other, interacting with each other, finding out what is important and supporting each other. So the other thing I think is interesting that you brought up is a lot of these kids that are playing sports don't even know what Title IX is. And in a way, that's good. In a way, it's challenging, because why should they have to worry about what's equal or not? So I'm actually proud of the fact that they don't necessarily know. But I also think it's very important that they know where it came from. It's been a gigantic ripple effect. When you think of when we started out in New London, a handful of games, the uniforms were, plastic practically. We've come a long way. We have a long way to go. But thank you for inviting me, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. Thank you.
I hope we'll learn a lot from these amazing women's athletic experiences here. And I just got a little thing here that says Minnesota has led as in girls' high school sports participation every year since 2011. So you got to be doing something right here. Now there's some time for questions here. If people have any questions that they'd like to ask, either Deb, Cindy, or both. Don't be shy.
Not not really a question, but I wonder if we have some. 72. I was at the University of Minnesota, and I remember the University of Minnesota wrestling coach just going ballistic, that this was going to ruin men's sports. Wrestling was going to be gone. They weren't going to get the 10 new mats every year. And this was terrible because nobody cared about women's sports. And obviously there were challenges, but things changed. I wonder, did you get a lot of kickback from coaches in other sports and so forth? Or any personal experiences with that?
Thanks for the question. In 72, we had Peg Brennan, who was on the bus tour, and she did sue the state high school to play tennis. She was a very good tennis player, and her brothers played, and brother-in-law was a lawyer and said, you know what? Let's take this to the higher court. So they did sue, so she could play on the boys' team. And I know some of the colleges, they were looking to make it equitable. So then they were looking at the sports such as wrestling, gymnastics, and they were end up cutting them rather than funding other women's sports. So they kind of put the women against the men and saying that this is a bad thing. And initially, Dorothy McIntyre did say this was a bad thing in 72. She kind of fought it at the beginning until they realized that this would open up opportunities for women and girls. So yeah, I have seen that, because that's what the U right now is. I think they cut the men's gymnastics and said because of Title IX. It's like, no, it costs them barely nothing to do that program. They just need to fund it. Cindy, anything?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think it's more of an excuse to cut things for funding, to fund football or fund basketball and some of these bigger sports. Iowa, of course, fought Dr. Grant pretty hard. The wrestling coach was Dan Gable back then, and he was not supportive of it at all. That's why we had to have separate departments, because it would be a war. But you know, Christine Brandt's budget was $3,000 in 1972, I believe. So it was pretty low. So they thought it was a threat. And you know, a lot of times change for people that are used to doing certain things, that change is hard. And it was, you know, just hard for them. They didn't want to lose their ground that they had gained, because they were not necessarily a major sport. They were a minor sport. Thank you for your question.
I'm a little out of touch with things. I think I grew up, of course, in high school when there was no girls' sports, and then was in college when Title IX was passed. But seemed like in the early days, I don't know how it's changed today but it seemed like in the early days the equality was based on equal number of sports available, and so you just mentioned about funding and things. So what is the basis for determining whether universities or even high schools are meeting Title IX today? Is it based on, you know, equal numbers of different sport opportunities, or is it more on, or what is it based on?
It's actually based on the number of participants, and then they have a special thing for football because there's just so many football players. I think there's only a total number. I don't know what that number is. Do you?
Players?
Yeah. I think so.
Oh, yeah. They almost have as many coaches as players.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, like with Title IX, but Title IX regulation is hard. You have to have and I think we were lucky we had Sandy Boyd down in Iowa, who was the president. And so we were very fortunate that they believed in women's athletics.
Thank you. Bruce.
So on the national stage, was a year ago, I think, where the NCAA chose to provide locker rooms and training for weight rooms, et cetera, for the NCAA college basketball championships that were vastly under the standards of the men's side. And then we have more recently the U.S. national women's soccer team, which was involved in lengthy litigation that I think has now resulted in them getting paid the same as the men, even though the women's team was vastly more successful. So what I'm wondering is, are those kinds of things, at least on a national level, are they still in play at what I would call the lower echelon of, say, the high schools across the country? Or has that pretty much been evened out at this point?
Yes, if you were following the NCAA women's, the year prior to this year, the women had a little V rack of like 5-pound, 10-pound dumbbells, and that was their weight room. And one of the players posted that on, I don't know, TikTok or Facebook or something, and said, this is the weight room for the NCAA women. And then they went in and showed the men's. It was bigger than this room here, fully funded with great equipment. So the Minnesota this year with the Title IX paired with the NCAA women's, and they said that will not be happening this year when the women's tournament is in Minneapolis. Now, I know the smaller schools, high schools, I believe that if they have just one weight room, like I've taught in Prior Lake, and I know the weight room in Prior Lake is phenomenal, but it is equal for the girls and the boys in there, and they're because they only usually just have one athletic director, so they make sure that it's covered. They don't have a girls and a boys. So I don't know in the smaller NCAA schools how that is funded, but I know that in high schools they try and make it as fair as they can. But Prior Lake is like number 5 biggest school in the state right now, so they have a good program. Where my little town of Lesueur, their weight room is probably still the same size weight room that when I was there in 75. But I don't know if you know anything more about that, Cindy, or not. Okay, so I know they're trying. And speaking to the soccer, I saw an interview this last weekend with one of the soccer players, and she said that yes, we are equal now, but she said it was the more important thing is that they had support of the men's soccer team, the USA soccer team. They said they were in our court, and it was very monumental that they had support of that team also.
There's no one else speaking of. There's more of a comment when this. I was in college when this happened, and we'd see girls playing basketball, and my peers would say, "Well, see, girls can't play. I could play against them. I'm a wrestler. I could play against these girl basketball players." And of course, they had just started playing in 9th grade or 10th grade, and the boys had been playing in all the little leagues. It took a few years, and then people say, "Oh, you know what? If you start the girls out when they're 7 or 8 years old playing basketball and softball, they don't throw like a girl anymore. By the time they get up to high school and college, they're very athletic and coordinated, and it was hard pill to swallow for some guys because they thought it was just going to go away. No one's going to, So I mean, I was kind of supportive, but I would see, oh yeah, we don't want to, and but yeah, you put girls in now they're start at the same age as the boys. They're going to be very, very successful.
Never quite know what a seed is going to grow to. I do have one comment.
And Autumn spoke to the player, basketball.
Yeah.
And the reason why they played six-person basketball is that you had the offense, 3 people on one side and 3 on the other side, and you only had like a dribble and a half or something like that.
2 dribbles.
2 dribbles. And the reason why they did that is that they thought the girls' uterus would get all tangled up if they ran more. That's where that came from. Well, then, once the Minnesota State High School League switched it to basketball, then the girls and the parents in Iowa started suing the state of Iowa, their high school league, because they said, our girls are not being allowed to get these scholarships because they were either an offensive player or a defensive player. They weren't fully rounded basketball players. So at that point, it kind of went against them. But that was really the reason why they played 6-man or 6-woman basketball. Kind of a shame. And they played in bloomers because my grandma played in bloomers. And in fact, there's a book written, Memories of a Bloomer Girl. So you can check that out.
I have a question. So what happened? We have a picture of our grandmother who played basketball too, back in 1919, 1950s?
Well, probably the 20s.
Yeah, the 20s. What happened? Why is it that way? Because when I went to Europe and I played basketball over there, there are 16 teams for the men and there's 16 teams for the women, and it's always been that way. They didn't have any of the put down the sex or put down, they just had, it's our town and we're going to support winning any sport at any time for girls, boys, men, women. It never came into question in Europe. And that's a European league. So they don't have school teams, they have league teams. Just like if you had Lifetime Fitness, Eden Prairie, that would be where everybody from Eden Prairie participated from. And then they would go against the Lifetime of Egan or something. But that's how they did it over there. And they didn't have any disparity. And everybody tried to make it to, A, B, C, or D. And that's how we played. So I thought it was really interesting when they looked at me like, we don't need Title IX, we have everything we want. Why would we need that? And why did you do that? So does anybody have the answer on what happened in the middle of World War I, World War II, and women couldn't play sports? Any theories? Okay.
I grew up in a very rural area in southeastern Missouri. And my older sister, who is 9 years older than I, was on a very successful girls' high school volleyball team. High school volleyball was a big deal in the 1950s in rural Missouri, where I lived. And I don't know the history of that. And I wondered whether either of you might know about that. It was, the teams were supported, all these little towns really turned out. They played lots of games a year. Yeah, and I've never explored the history of that myself. I wondered if any of you knew that, because that was certainly the only sport that girls played in those days. Yeah.
We've got another question here. Did you say you had a question?
A comment and a question. Follow up on yours. I've seen her play with men. They don't play as well as her. But
That's my brother-in-law.
and I've seen her whole family play. Recently, I read a report about the discrepancies in how men and women's sports are reporting participation. And for women, it's those who try out, and for men, it's those who make the team. And for women's, if a women's team practices against a men's team, those men are considered women participants. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but it's watching that, anytime you have a metric, there's a way to try to work what that metric does, but to watch the numbers of what is a participant.
Did you have a question, Roberta?
I don't want to assume that I know where we need to go.
You know, in other words, I'd be curious to see what your priorities are in terms of, you know, where you want to see Title IX equality and go, and where you see the inequities right now. And is it on the high school level? It is on the college level? Is it all across the board? Is it in the administrative level? I'm just curious as to where you see we've got work to do.
I play golf during the week up in Minneapolis, and one of the gals there has a son who wanted to have a volleyball team. And they went to the state, Minnesota State, and said, hey, can we have boys volleyball? And they were turned down. And to me, the Title IX isn't to put a cap on anything. Title IX is a playing field, is to just level the playing field. But it's sad when they have all this interest, and why not let the boys play volleyball? Or why not have people, you know, instead of always have to go with the restrictions? And she came back and said, it's that Title IX. And it's like, no, it's not Title IX, it's the people on that board, you know, because you can expand it however. I see it going to club sports. I see us transitioning from schools to maybe club sports because of the expense. I see a lot of that. I think college is semi-pro. I think you're seeing it right now with this transition portal or transfer portal. I mean, it's crazy that a senior from Minnesota, in my mind, would transfer to Indiana, a competitor, when they have all these records and everything. So there's something missing or something going on. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I do think we need to take a look at it as a baseline and then grow it.
Right. Annie Adams-Zach was on the bus tour. If you were familiar with the Minnesota High School League, she was a basketball player from Moose Lake, very well rounded athlete. She ended up playing volleyball in Nebraska. And right now she is a coordinator of a volleyball club team. And she said what's happening right now is the inequity of funding, because some people think that they need to have their kids playing hockey at 7th grade, and if they don't play right now, they're not going to get on the high school team, and they're not going to be in the college, and they're not going to be in the pro. Or sometimes I think we think about the joy of playing, and I want to win just as much as everyone else, but the inequity now of people, she said, in the inner city, those kids don't have the money to go to the camps. They don't have the money to be on the traveling team, which is about $6,000-7,000. Think about it. For a 10-year-old that wants to play volleyball on a traveling team, an AAU team, where are they going to get those funds from? So we looked at girls and boys, and she said, now we have to look at the inequity of funding. How are we going to get everyone on an equal playing field so they're able to do that? Because like you said, if you just pick up a basketball and you're in 9th grade, and this other one's been playing since 7th grade and been in camps and traveling, it's the inequity is the skill level is not there. And you know, in the inner city or some of the smaller areas, we need these kids to be involved in something, because I think we're seeing some things that kids aren't involved in, great activities with great role models, and then they have a chance to get into something that they probably shouldn't.
Yeah, my son just graduated from high school at Bloomington Jefferson, and there are 415 kids in the graduating class. Okay, that's 15 kids played on the basketball team, boys, 15 girls. Okay, that's 400 kids that should be playing. And they should be playing, and they're physical, and he's more of a computer head, and he likes to, you know, downhill skiing, things like that. But during the year, getting him to move was almost impossible. And in my mind, I come from a PE background as well. It's your physical, spiritual. How do you handle all those emotions all the time? The COVID challenges, and you're not moving. You know, I just think all these kids need to move, but that's a different thing other than sport. But again, my whole thing with Title IX, it's about opportunity. It's not about achievement. Achievement comes for the few. Those 50 people that the Star Tribune highlighted, that's fantastic. But the real story is that there were 2 million girls that participated in sports. That's the story to be told in my mind.